everyone. Welcome to the ZOA Book Club. We are really thrilled to have you here today and to welcome back Ambassador Danon. Ambassador Danon last was at our book club speaking about his wonderful book, Israel, The Will to Prevail, about 2 years ago. And at that time, he was busy writing his book about his UN experience. And we asked him if he would please come back when he finished that book to speak about his new book. And we are really thrilled now, here, I hope you can see it, to have Ambassador Danon speak about his new book, In the Lion's Den, Israel and the World, just after it's hot off the presses. So Ambassador Danon, I will turn the proceedings over to you.
Thank you very much, Liz. It's so good to see so many dear friends. And as you mentioned, most of you were very involved with all the experiences at the UN from 2015 to 2020. I invited most of you to the event, and you showed up and you stood with me in the lion's den. In the Bible, Daniel spent one night in the lion's den. For me, it was 5 long years. And that's why I felt that after I finished my term, that I have to tell the stories, the experiences, and the lessons learned for the future, for the state of Israel, and not only in terms of what happened, but also to expose who supported us, who came against us, but also to give tools for the future for any advocate for Israel, like the committed friends of the ZOA that stand for Israel. So I think you would gain tools to fight BDS, anti-Semitism. So it's more than a memoir. For me, it's like a very practical book that can inspire and give ideas to anyone who cares about Israel.
Well, thank you. I guess we're going to open this up to questions a little bit early. And if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. One question that I had emailed in was about what happened with the Obama administration, particularly with Resolution 2234 at the end of the Obama administration, which you discussed at length in the book, and also the additional resolution that Obama tried to push through. Incidentally, Mort Klein and I wrote about that in our chapter, but it's very few people know about the second resolution, which was even worse, if that can be imagined. And could you speak about that whole episode?
So for me, that's the most interesting chapter. If you haven't read the book, for me, that's the most because for me, it was the lowest moment in my public career. And you know that I spent in many important positions as Deputy Minister of Defense, as a minister in the cabinet. I have seen a lot. But to actually be in the Security Council by myself and to fight not only the Palestinians or the EU or the UN officials, but also the US, that was very challenging. And for me, I write in details what happened before the vote and after the vote. And before the vote, I think the most important thing is to realize and to understand that the US was actively engaged in drafting the resolution and securing the votes for the resolution. When Secretary Kerry spoke about it, he tried to portray it differently, that it was a moral decision for supporting the Israelis. He didn't mention that, he was heavily engaged. And I found out about it, and I felt bad. And I can tell you that, the content of the resolution is shameful. And you know that, it's called Yes. Our presence in the old city of Jerusalem, a flagrant violation of international law. Give me a break. That's disgraceful. But you know what, Liz? I could have handled that if, the US ambassador would have come to me and tell me that the instructions I got from the president, we're going to push forward the resolution next week. We will fight back. But what they did behind our back, that's something which is, for me, was worse than the content of the resolution. That's not how you treat your ally. It's okay to disagree. And in many occasions, we don't agree with the US, but we talk about it, we discuss it, and we can agree to disagree. But what happens there, that they worked quietly behind our back, and I actually received for the first time that the Israeli diplomats or the prime minister, we actually knew about the resolution, was when a Muslim ambassador called me and told me that it's happening. For me, that was very, very disappointing. Yeah, I worked really hard against the resolution, but it was mission impossible. You know, even countries who wanted to abstain, like Ukraine, they had two reasons to abstain. First, they had good relations with Israel. The ambassador is a good friend of mine. And also President-elect Trump back then, he asked them to not to support the resolution, but they were afraid from the response of the administration in the last days that they had. So even countries that wanted to abstain were not allowed to abstain. And after the vote, you know, I was sitting by myself. Everybody were clapping and cheering, and I delivered a very strong speech where I told them that we will overcome this resolution like we overcame the Romans, the Babylonians, you know, the Amalek. Always we had, you know, people coming against us, and we prevailed. I was sure about that. I didn't know it will happen very fast, you know, with Nikki Haley and Trump coming and supporting us the following weeks. But one thing I tell in the book that I took a decision without consulting anyone. And immediately after the vote, I went to the media and I decided to expose the behavior of the US and the cowardly behavior of President Obama. Not about the content, about the way it was done. And they denied it. You know, they sent Secretary Kerry to the media to respond to my allegations. And they said it wasn't the US. You know, they had no choice. But, you know, in public life, you learn a lot. And I learned that if somebody is not answering your calls, it means that something is happening. And when I was trying to get answers from Ambassador Samantha Power, she wouldn't take my calls. And when we tried to connect Prime Minister Netanyahu to President Obama, we got an answer that is on a vacation in Hawaii and he cannot take the call. So we knew it's coming. It's unfortunate. It's going to be very hard for us to overcome the resolution, because the resolution will stay there. It's not going away. It will stay there for years, and every few months you're going to have reports about the resolution. But as I said, you know, no UN resolutions can disconnect us from Jerusalem, and that's also the story with 2334.
Thank you, Danny. Could you also speak about the resolution that followed 2334?
Can you repeat the question, Liz?
Oh, yes. Could you speak about the resolution that followed 2334 that Obama tried to push through, and then, you know, the Russians ended up helping Israel on that?
So, you know, a day before the vote, I was lobbying ambassadors, trying to convince them to postpone the vote, because we knew time was on our side. And I met the late Ambassador Vitaly Churkin, a very experienced Russian diplomat. He was the ambassador of Russia to the UN for many years. He was a good friend, even though we didn't agree on most cases, but we discussed everything. And when I approached him the day before the vote, trying to convince him, he told me, Danny, you know, I will not lie to you. We cannot veto the resolution because our history with the Palestinians, we always endorse them in the Security Council. But I can tell you one thing, the second resolution, we will not support. And I was shocked. I told him, Vitaly, what are you talking about? What second resolution? And he actually revealed to us for the first time that the US was presenting two resolutions to the Security Council. The first we all know about, the 2334, which passed. The second resolution, it was called back then Parameters for Peace. And basically it was a vision of President Obama for peace in the Middle East. And you can imagine the content, you know, the issue of two states, refugees, Jerusalem divided. That was the language of the resolution. And he confirmed to me, Ambassador Churkin, that the Russia will actually veto the second resolution if the US will present it. So I thanked him. I asked him to try to postpone the vote. And by the way, he did try. Before the vote, he was trying to buy time. have consultation, to ask to postpone the vote, but it didn't happen because the rest of the members were against it. But the minute I walked out from the Russian embassy, I told my driver and my security to get out of the car, and I called the prime minister to actually share the information with him. And for us, it was a big surprise to learn about two anti-Israel resolutions that were pushed by the administration a few days before they finished their term.
Okay, and could you? I like your theory that you speak about in the book about being about openly speaking when somebody is challenging Israel in the back.
Ambassador Danon, first of all, thank you very much for all of your activities for Israel, the state of Israel, in this office or in that office. Can you please tell us what's your plans for the future? We would like to see you in future great positions for the sake of the state of Israel and the people of Israel. What's your plans?
Thank you, Do. That's usually the question we answer at the end, but I will address it because I know you cannot wait for the answer. But I learned a lot about global affairs at the UN. I gained a lot of experience. I made a lot of connections with world leaders. And definitely
you brought accomplishments for Israel. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. And I intend to take that knowledge with me when I enter public service in the future. So we don't know when the elections will take place. I hope it will happen very soon. We can talk about it later. But definitely, I intend to take the knowledge I gained and the connection and the ideology that I have for years and put it into action for the people and the country I love so much.
I'm very happy to hear that. If there's anything I can help, I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Drew, for that question. And a related question is, does it make sense, like, I understand that the ambassador from Djibouti was there in the UN for 27 years. And I know that you served wonderfully for 5 years, and that's a very long time. And Gilad or Don is doing a wonderful service at the UN now. But does it make sense for Israel to have a permanent ambassador, you or Gilad or anybody in the future, who will be there over the long term because of the time it takes to develop those friendships that you made and to develop those relationships? Do you think that makes sense, or what do you think is the ideal amount of time to serve at the UN?
So I think 5 years is a long period of time. Most ambassadors from Israel stay for 2-3 years. I think you have a point. The longer you stay, you know the people, you know the drill, you know how to accomplish things. And when I was in year 1 or 2, it was much harder than when I was there for like almost 4 or 5 years. But one thing you have to take into consideration, Liz, that in Israel, we have elections and governments are not staying, the same governments. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to be effective when you represent a government that you don't identify with its ideology. And I will give you a few examples. When I was there, Netanyahu was the prime minister and the minister of foreign affairs. And many times you have to, you need to trust the ambassador, and the ambassador has to trust the prime minister when you discuss very sensitive issues. So if you have a new government in office, and my dear friend Gilad, today it's very challenging for him because Lapid is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And you don't want me to give grace to Lapid, but I think he's making a lot of mistakes. He's inexperienced. And we saw it when there was a vote in the General Assembly about Ukraine and Russia. Lapid announced publicly to the media that he's asking the deputy ambassador to speak and not the ambassador, which I respect the deputy ambassador. She worked with me. She's a great professional career diplomat. But what Lapid was trying to say, that he cannot trust the ambassador because he's a Likud member. So I think it's sensitive. It's sensitive when you have change of government. But if you would ask me, if you have the same government, I would agree with you that you want the ambassador to stay there for 4 years. I think it makes him much more effective than ambassador that come every 2 years.
Mhm. And another question is whether you think that resolution 2334 will ever be overturned, you know, just as well, it took 16 years to overturn the Zionism is racism resolution from 1975. But what do you think the chances are that, you know, maybe 16 years from now or at some point 2234 will be overturned?
So I think it's very hard to overturn the resolution. And I think what we should try is to pass new resolutions that will actually dilute the hate and will overcome the language of the resolution.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the right approach. It will be very hard to bring the country that voted for the resolution to come and say, no, now we are changing our mind. But I think it's more reasonable to bring new language with new resolutions. And same with resolution in the General Assembly. You know, when I clocked in, I tried to see what we can do to cancel the 22 famous resolutions against Israel that are being brought to the UN General Assembly every November. And I realized that it was impossible. So instead, I put on the agenda new resolutions, you know, condemning Hamas,
Right.
Hezbollah, and that's the way to do it, is to dilute the hate. I don't think you can actually overturn them so easily.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you know, you wrote wonderfully about your father and his experience, and also that he came from Alexandria. His family came from Alexandria to make Aliyah. And did the fact that, you know, you had that Egyptian background in your family help you in relating to the Egyptian ambassador in the UN, or could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Egypt during your years at the UN?
Absolutely. You know, my late father, he taught me a lot, and I tell his story in the book. And I think that the fact that I brought, you know, the tradition and the respect to our religion to the whole of the UN was very important. You know, many times, you know, my colleagues in the ministry in Jerusalem told me, Danny, we are diplomats, we don't talk about the Bible. And I told them that's your mistake. You know, where I grew up, you know, it all starts with respect to our tradition and to the Bible. And once I started to quote from the Bible in the Security Council and in the General Assembly, I gained the respect of the Muslim ambassadors. And they told me that we don't agree with your policy, but, you know, your approach, the fact that you are so respectful for your tradition and for your religion, and they call it the Holy Book. When you bring your Holy Book with you, and then we wanted to sit with you and learn from you. And I think it speaks for itself. And I continue to bring our tradition into action. You know, we celebrated our holidays. It was very effective. And I think that in order to ask for respect, we have to respect first our traditions.
Wonderful. I'm going to read some from the chat. We have a lot of people in the chat who've already read the books and say, you know, or speak about how wonderful it is, and recommending it, that everybody buys it. Let's see. Okay, here's a question from Stephen Gilbert. Is American public opinion an existential risk to Israel, given the malign influence of progressives, leftist professors, and the mainstream media on public opinion?
So I think the majority of the American people are still supporting Israel, according to data I saw. But you don't hear about it. You hear about the squad and ridiculous idea they put forward in Congress. And I think we should be more vocal and ask our supporters to be more vocal. But I don't think in terms of numbers, we are losing the support. I think today, people still realize that we live in a tough area. We fight the radicals. And I think today when people see that we have a great relation with the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco, you know, they realize it's not about Israel. It's about the Palestinians who are not really considering to sit down and negotiate. I think we need more vocal voices supporting Israel, but I don't think that we lost the support in the US.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I wanted to ask you about the UNESCO on Hebron, the resolution, the terrible resolution on Hebron. You were very, made very strong comments criticizing it. And of course, the U.S. ended up leaving. And what do you think of the Biden administration's, sort of renewed involvement in the UNHRC and the the Human Rights Council and in UNESCO?
So UNESCO is a great example of the flaws of the UN. It's supposed to be a great organization, supporting culture and historical sites worldwide. And unfortunately, it was kidnapped by radical forces who use it to attack Israel. And we saw it with Hebron, with Jerusalem. And when I took the ambassadors with me, I initiated a program which is continuing today to bring ambassadors to Israel. The first time it was very hard for me to recruit them, but the second time was much easier. But I recall when we took them to the city of David and we showed them the eternal connection of the Jewish people to Jerusalem. And then I told them, and how your country voted in UNESCO a few weeks ago? And they were speechless because, when you stand there and you see the coins in the ground and you see the history in action, and you understand that you actually vote on resolutions that deny our connection to Jerusalem, it puts you in a place where you have to think twice about your behavior. But I think, again, we should not take part on those institutions if they choose not to promote their agenda, but just to attack Israel.
I think we're having a little bit of a technical problem. I want to stop this. Apparently, screen share is on. Somebody is sharing their screen, not me. Jackie, could you unmute yourself and we can figure this out?
Liz, it's fine now.
It's fine now, everybody, because I was getting a lot of messages that people were having problems seeing this properly. It's okay? Great. Great. That's great. Okay. All right, we have a question from Cherie Boliker asking, why, if we have a warm peace with the Abraham Accord nations, do they continue to vote against Israel at the UN?
So I think we should be patient about it. It's not going to be overnight that they will change the way they vote, especially when it comes to the Arab League. But number counts. Usually you have the group deciding how to vote. And when you look at the Arab League today, we have Egypt and Jordan, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and maybe a few other, Chad. We have a few other countries supporting Israel. And I think what we have to realize that it will take time, but they do share information with us, which is very important. And I think also in the future, we can see them changing the voting patterns. It will not be overnight, but I think we should demand it. That's one thing I learned at the UN, that we have to demand more from our friends. And that's what I did. I told them, read the resolution you are voting on. Don't be just, follow the instructions. So I think we now can start to have a discussion with them about that.
Great. That's great. Let's see, we have Christopher Weaver. It says that the Palestinian Arab movement seems to be making headway in the US and Europe by having many accommodating journalists. And there's also increasing anti-Israel sentiment. How can Israel reach out to correct the record more aggressively? Anti-Semitism is again on the rise.
So, in the book, I write a lot that it's a marathon. It's an ongoing fight. Every morning we wake up, and many of the people that are with us today, they are activists for years, like myself, and it's not going to end. We're not going to wake up one morning and say, that's it, we won. We convinced the media, we convinced the world, and we can continue with our life. It's not the case. Every day, it's a fight. Every day, it's a challenge. We just saw it in the last few days with the reporter from Al Jazeera that was killed, unfortunately, and we saw that the way it's being used to incite against Israel. So every day we should be ready to fight back and to present the truth and to understand that, it's not going to end. That's part of Zionism today. I call it, it's an ongoing Zionism. It's a daily Zionism that you have to routinely fight back. And it's not like the 6-day war that we know in 6 days we won the war and we celebrated. That will not be the case when we deal with those anti-Semites and anti-Zionists today.
Another very good question now from Robin Gutman, very current. What do you think about Hezbollah losing its majority in Lebanon?
I hope that it will require them to spend more time, in their political efforts than actually in supplying arms to the southern border. But they are not going anywhere. They are still there. They are still very influential. But I think it shows that the people in Lebanon, they understand that Hezbollah is a problem, is a liability for them, and they're not happy about it. I still don't think that they are capable of pushing them out. They are there, they are influential, but I think it shows the sentiment. And I wish and I pray that one day the people of Lebanon will be able to become independent again and actually put their interests in the front and not the Hezbollah or Iran interests.
Right. Oh, and Michael Alterman is letting us know that he can't do an Amazon review because they limit reviews only to people who bought the book on Amazon, and he got the book Sunday at the Eretz Sheva conference, the Jerusalem conference in New York City, and he'd love to. He loves the book. Do you know where any place else where people can put a great review of your book?
So it's very important to put the review on Amazon. If it's I know that the books are sold out, but I know that they are reprinting them, so soon they will be able to ship it to customers. But I would appreciate reviews, and I think it's great to see that still people are interested about what's happening in Israel. And I think we spoke about what happened in the Security Council, but once you read the book, you get a lot of the inside of what's really happening in world diplomacy, in politics, and it's fascinating. I have to tell you, Liz, that with this book, I learned that we have censorship in Israel. And because I was in a very senior position in the diplomatic service, I had to go through 3 committees and to approve the content of the book. My first book, when I was member of Knesset, no one had any saying about the content. But with this book, and it was a real process, to back and forth, negotiating, what can I say, how can we say it? And that I don't, give in so easily. So, and I'm happy that at the end of the day, 99% of the things I wanted to express, I was able to do it in the book.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Oh, yeah. I mean, was a lot censored, or just it was a minor annoyance?
No. So basically, the fact that you have to work with 3 separate committees, you have a governmental committee, you have a committee of the IDF, believe it or not, and then you have to work with the Ministry of Defense. So each one of them, they have their own concerns. But most of the things I convinced them that it's I'm not revealing secrets, but they were concerned about also the mechanism. When somebody actually learns how we operate and how we coordinate. One of the things I write in the book is that the struggle I had with my colleagues in the IDF about declassifying information. I'm sure somebody will ask me in 2 minutes about the Israeli Hasbara, why we don't improve the work we do. And I explain in the book that, the challenge for me was to get material from Israeli intelligence and to declassify it and to show it to our colleagues. And it was always a challenge until the chief of staff of the military, Eisenkot, back then, he gave them a very clear directions, and he told them that you have to cooperate with Dani. And that allowed me to get classified information, to declassify it, and it was very effective. When you come to the Security Council and you show them aerial photos of Hezbollah activities on our border, they cannot deny it. Or when you show them the tunnel activities. But you know, it's give and take, and many times the intelligence, they told me, Danny, we cannot expose our capabilities, we cannot expose our sources in Lebanon, and we had to negotiate about it. But I think in general, it's very important to invest and to understand that it's not only important to win on the ground, we have to win the war also in the public eyes.
That's great. Okay, another question is you wrote in the book about you're opposing Netanyahu from the same party at the Likud Central Committee when Obama was pressuring Netanyahu to agree to a freeze, you know, about a decade ago, the 10-month freeze. And could you let us know what were the pressures that were placed on Netanyahu by the Obama administration to agree to the freeze?
So firstly, I will correct you. I wasn't opposing Netanyahu. I was opposing the policy of the government.
I know. Oh, okay. All right.
And for me, it's very important to, you know, I know how to fight, and, you know, people in the Likud know that, you know, I don't back down, but I never kept it personal. Once he decided to freeze the building in Judea and Samaria because of the pressure that was put on him by President Obama, you know, I led the opposition to that. And Netanyahu promised me that it will be only for 10 months and there will be no extension.
Right.
And what I did, I took this promise to my colleagues in the Likud faction, and they told me, Danny, if you will try to extend it, we will be with you. But this time you'll lead the opposition, but we will support you. And look what happened. You know, a few weeks before, Secretary Clinton tried to push Prime Minister Netanyahu to extend the settlement freeze, as they called it, for another 10 months. And I told Netanyahu that will be it. You know, I have the support in the party, that he will lose the support in the coalition. And I remember that I had a meeting with the US ambassador to Israel back then, Dan Shapiro, and he actually wanted to know whether I was serious about the threat, because they were really pushing Netanyahu. And I told him I'm definitely serious about it. I have a clear promise from the Prime Minister, not to me, but to the party, to the people in Israel, that it will be only for 10 months. We saw that Abbas, he didn't move 1 inch, you know, during the freeze. There was no negotiations. They continued with the incitements, paying salaries for terrorists. Everything continued. And I told him, you can send a message to Washington that there is a real opposition to a second freeze. And I gladly, we were able to block that effort. But it shows that...
Can you repeat?
Please keep yourselves muted, people.
But it showed to me that, you know, sometimes when you lead
My bad.
ideological campaign, you can win, even if it's against the US or the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Let's see, we have another question from Steve Gilbert about why doesn't India support Israel at the UN? We have a very good relationship, obviously, with India and trade and so on.
Can you repeat the question, Liz?
Oh, it was a question from Stephen Gilbert. Why doesn't India support Israel at the United Nations?
So actually, in the last few years, it's much better. In general, you know, we established relationship with India. You know, it was quite late compared to other countries, and they immediately joined the group of countries at the UN, the G77, which are not friendly to Israel. But I can tell you that, you know, I was able to change it. Things are moving to the right direction. Former Prime Minister Netanyahu built a very strong relationship with the leadership in India, and we started to see the change. So I wouldn't accept. And one of the stories I tell in the book is about my race for the legal committee, for the sixth committee, which I won, and I set a precedent for becoming the first Israeli ever to chair a UN committee. Actually, I speak about the involvement of the Indian ambassador who supported me in that race.
Great, thank you. Could you also speak about Israel's relationship with Ukraine while you were in the ambassador to the UN?
So with Ukraine, we had very friendly relationships. They support Israel, not always, but the US is very close to them. And I was very friendly with the ambassador, and especially when they had a seat on the Security Council. That's where we can actually, we accomplished a lot, and it was very important for us.
And Arnold Packman had a question. He's concerned about the erosion of, I think you sort of addressed this, of some of the base of support, and particularly the coalition government, which includes Arab parties. Can you, the Arab Party, can you, Ram, can you speak about that a bit?
So I'm biased. I'm the chairman of World Likud, and I wish that the government will not last for long. I think it's very problematic what we are seeing today. A weak government. You see that the radicals from the Arab sectors are allowing themselves to do things that I would never imagine they would do. Marching with flags in universities, attacking Jews in the old city. And that's something which we have to correct, and I believe we will do it once we come back to power ASAP. I think the fact that today you have a coalition of only 60 MKs, it's impossible, and moreover that you actually rely on the Muslim movement. You can imagine that every decision that the government must take, they have to ask for permission from Mansour Abbas and his colleagues. That's something for me, it's unacceptable, because when you want to maintain sovereignty in the Negev and Galilee, when you want to restore law and order, you cannot do it when you are dependent on such radical voices.
And can you also speak about relationships with Turkey, which you spoke about some in the book, and your relationships with the Turkish ambassador and so on?
So I always make the distinction between Turkey and the Turkish people and Erdogan. I think that he's very problematic. We should be very cautious, especially now when he's trying to become friendly with us again. And we should look at actions and not declarations. When President Herzog visited Turkey, he was received very nice. But the question is, what's happening with the Hamas operatives that are walking today in the streets of Istanbul and Ankara? So we should demand answers from Turkey, especially now when they are trying to use Israel to promote their economical interest in the region. When we speak about natural gas and other things that they have in mind, we should be very careful about the behavior of Erdogan. At the same time, the Turkish people, I think they have nothing against us, and I hope that one day we'll be able to restore the friendly relations we had with them.
Okay, and I understand that you have to leave us a little early today, and you have another meeting. But we very much appreciate your time, and we appreciate all the effort that you made to bring to us this wonderful book, In the Lion's Den. The ZOA Book Club is so pleased that you came to us today. And if you'd like to make a couple of concluding remarks, we'd love to hear those.
Sure. I want to first thank you, Liz. I don't have a plan for a third book, but for sure, if there will be a third book, I would love to come again to the ZOA Book Club.
You're very welcome.
So many dear friends. I encourage all of you to buy the book, to order it, and to write reviews on Amazon. And I think it's, as I said before, it's a great tool. We're going to have to fight BDS and anti-Semitism. They are not going anywhere. I believe that, sharing the stories and my experiences would inspire many to become a stronger and better advocate for Israel. So I want to thank you all for standing with Israel, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon in Israel.
Thank you, everybody. And there, I don't know if you can see the chat from there, but there's so many remarks praising you and praising the book and thanking you for being with us today. Thank you again.
Thank you very
Ambassador.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.